The blood on my hands had been there for 3 days before I realized it wasn't mine. I worked as a data analyst for the European Collective's Psychometric Division, a job so boring most people's eyes glaze over when I explain it. We track emotional trends, map behavioral patterns, predict consumer responses to stimuli. Corporate fortune-telling dressed in the language of science. But 3 nights ago, something changed. I woke up choking on copper taste, my palms slick with something warm that disappeared the moment I turned on the lights. And I knew, the way you know things in nightmares that follow you into waking, that 7 billion other people had just experienced the exact same thing. The visions came in 4 waves, each one a color that had no name in any human language. The first was red, but not the red of roses or sunsets. This was the red of open throats, of arterial spray catching light, of the final moment when a skull splits and something wet and sacred spills onto ancient stone. I stood in an ocean of that red, and in the distance, something vast was learning to speak. Each word it learned was a death. Each death fed its syntax, and it was smiling. The second wave was green. The green of rot that has become so complete it circles back to fertility. Flesh sloughing off bone, but gently, with love, with the patience of a father teaching his child to walk. Flies formed cathedrals in the air. Pustules bloomed like flowers, and beneath it all, a presence so warm, so accepting, that I wanted to lie down in the filth and sleep forever. It whispered that all endings were false, that entropy was just transformation wearing a mask, that I could be cherished, preserved, made perfect through decay. The third wave was purple, but purple like a bruise spreading beneath the skin of reality itself. Sensation without limit, pleasure and pain woven so tightly they became a single screaming note that never ended. Bodies without boundaries, experiences without conclusion, hunger that fed on satisfaction and grew stronger. It promised everything. Every desire fulfilled, every nerve ending pushed past breaking, every taboo ground to powder beneath the weight of pure, transcendent excess. And I wanted it. Emperor, forgive me. I wanted it so badly I could taste it, could feel my own edges starting to dissolve. The fourth wave was blue. The blue of flame that burns so cold it becomes abstract thought made visible. Impossible geometries unfolding in dimensions that should not intersect. Plans within plans within plans, each one mutating the moment I grasped it, each one leading to 900 futures that contradicted themselves and all came true simultaneously. It showed me that causality was a joke, that free will was a pattern the cosmos had learned to parrot, that every choice I had ever made had been decided by dice thrown before the universe began. And I laughed, because the joke was so perfect, and the laughter tasted like ashes. When I woke, my nose was bleeding, my ears were bleeding, and on my apartment wall, written in what I desperately hoped was my own blood, were 4 symbols I had never seen before but somehow knew how to pronounce. The names were already in my head. Khorne, Nurgle, Slaanesh, Tzeentch. 4 princes, 4 thrones, 4 gods, learning to breathe inside the collective dream of humanity. I should have called the authorities. Should have checked myself into a hospital. Instead, I went to work, because I needed to see the data. I needed to confirm what my gut already knew, that this wasn't mass hysteria or viral contamination or any of the comfortable lies the news feeds were already churning out. I needed to see the numbers prove that something impossible was happening. The office was half empty when I arrived. Those who had shown up moved like sleepwalkers, their eyes distant, their hands trembling when they reached for coffee cups or styluses. No one spoke. We all knew. We had all seen it. Talking would make it real, and none of us were ready for that yet. I locked myself in my workstation and pulled up the global emotional mapping indices, the real-time data streams that tracked everything from social media sentiment to biometric readings from smart devices. What I saw made my chest tighten. Every sensor, every algorithm, every predictive model was screaming the same thing: synchronization. 7 billion human beings had experienced identical REM patterns at the identical moment. The statistical probability of that occurring naturally was so close to 0 it might as well be impossible. But it was the secondary data that made my hands go cold. Beneath the synchronization, 4 distinct emotional frequencies were emerging, each one growing stronger by the hour. Rage, despair twisted into acceptance, pleasure divorced from context, hope corroded by infinite possibility. The frequencies weren't random, they were organized, they were learning, they were being fed. I dug deeper, following data trails that led into archived research, projects that had been shuttered decades ago for reasons the files never explained. One name kept appearing: Dr. Anton Corvallis, a cognitive theorist who had worked for the old United Nations before the collective absorbed it. He had been studying something he called psychic resonance cascades, trying to model what happened when enough minds dreamed in unison. His work had been classified in 2031, and he had vanished 6 months later. The official story was suicide. The unofficial story, buried in rumor and redacted documents, was that he had discovered something that terrified every government on Earth. I found his final research proposal in an unindexed archive, hidden behind 7 layers of outdated encryption. The document was incomplete, sentences cutting off mid-thought, equations trailing into frantic scribbles. But one section was perfectly clear, highlighted in red, marked with a stamp that read, Existential Threat Level, Omega. He had found 12 other planets, 12 worlds that had once housed intelligent life, now silent, their surfaces scoured clean by events the surviving records could barely describe. Every one of them had exhibited the same pre-collapse signature, synchronized dreaming followed by the emergence of 4 distinct emotional resonance patterns. Corvallis had called them the quaternary manifestation. He theorized they were not entities that invaded from outside, but rather psychic constructs that formed spontaneously when a species reached a critical mass of collective consciousness. Gods born from emotion, sustained by thought, given form by the very act of being perceived. He had written, in the margins of the final page, a single sentence in shaking script: "We are not discovering them, we are creating them, and they are hungry for a universe that does not yet exist." I printed the document with hands that would not stop trembling. As the pages emerged from the printer, I noticed something odd. In the corner of each page, so faint I almost missed it, were 4 symbols. The same symbols I had written on my wall. The same symbols that were now appearing in graffiti across every major city on Earth, spray-painted by people who claimed they had no memory of making them. The names, the thrones, the princes learning to rule. I needed to find someone who understood what Corvallis had been trying to say. Someone who had worked with him, who might still have access to the research he had completed before he vanished. I cross-referenced his publication history, his known associates, anyone who had collaborated on his papers. Most were dead. Some had disappeared under circumstances eerily similar to Corvallis himself. But one name stood out: Dr. Yevena Cross, a neurosymbolic researcher who had co-authored 3 papers with Corvallis before abruptly leaving the field and vanishing from public record. It took me 4 hours to track her down. She was living in a monastery in the Himalayas, of all places, having renounced her academic career and taken vows of silence. I sent a message to the monastery's public contact, not expecting a response. She called me 11 minutes later. "You dreamed it, didn't you?" Her voice was rough, underused. "You saw them?" "Yes." "Then you already know what's happening. You know what we are." "Tell me anyway," I said. "Tell me I'm wrong." She laughed, a sound like glass breaking. "We're not wrong. That's the horror. Corvallis was right. We confirmed it before they shut us down. Humanity doesn't have a warp, not like the theoretical models predicted. But we have something else. A proto-realm. A space that exists inside the collective unconscious, growing denser every time we dream, every time we feel, every time we imagine. For thousands of years, it was harmless, just background noise. But we've reached critical mass. 7 billion minds, all connected through technology, all dreaming together. We've created a resonance chamber, and inside that chamber, something is forming. 4 somethings. Yes, the quaternary. Corvallis believed they were inevitable, that any species that developed consciousness would eventually dream them into being. They're archetypal, fundamental, war, decay, excess, change. Every culture has myths about them because every culture is trying to process the same psychic reality. We thought they were metaphors. We were wrong. They're embryos. And we're the womb. I closed my eyes. The office around me felt unreal. Too bright, too mundane for what we were discussing. How long do we have? Before they're born? Kervalis estimated 6 months from first manifestation. But that was theoretical. We're in uncharted territory now. The second wave should come soon. Days, maybe. It'll be more physical, more direct. The frequencies need to establish themselves in consensus reality, not just in dreams. They'll start reshaping behavior, warping causality, bending the laws of nature toward their nature. Can we stop it? The silence on the line stretched so long I thought she had hung up. Then, no, we can't stop birth. We can only decide what kind of world the newborns inherit. Kervalis had a theory. If we could map the exact resonance patterns, identify the individuals who are most strongly connected to each frequency, we might be able to guide the formation, shape them, make them less hostile. You're talking about human sacrifice. I'm talking about survival. The frequencies are already choosing their champions, their anchors. People who embody the emotions they feed on. If we can find those people before the frequencies fully awaken, if we can control the connection, we might have a chance. And if we can't, then we become the first world to birth the ruinous powers into a universe that has no defenses against them. We export them to every planet humanity will ever touch. We doom the galaxy before we ever leave our own solar system. I heard someone scream in the office outside my workstation. Then another scream. Then the sound of breaking glass and something wet hitting the floor. I stood, my legs weak, and opened the door. The man from accounting, the quiet one who always ate lunch alone, was standing in the center of the bullpen with a letter opener in his hand. His coworker was on the floor, throat opened, blood spreading in a pool that looked black under the fluorescent lights. The man with the letter opener was smiling. His eyes were red, not bloodshot. Red, like someone had replaced his irises with rubies. "It feels so good," he whispered. "It feels so right. Don't you want to feel it too? Don't you want to matter?" I slammed the door and locked it. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. "Yevena, it's starting. It's starting right now." "I know," she said quietly. "I can feel it. The red frequency just spiked. Khorne is feeding. He's choosing his first priests. What do I do? Run. Get somewhere isolated. Somewhere with as few people as possible. The resonance is strongest in population centers. The more minds in proximity, the faster the cascade accelerates. And whatever you do, do not feel strongly. Do not rage. Do not despair. Do not desire. Do not plan. The frequencies are drawn to intensity. If you burn too bright, they will notice you. And once they notice you, you belong to them. The door to my workstation shuddered. Something heavy hit it from the other side. I heard that wet, satisfied breathing, the sound of someone discovering purpose for the first time. "Where do I go?" I whispered. "Find the others. The ones who are still lucid. Form a monitoring team. Document everything. When this is over, when humanity has become something else, someone needs to remember what we were before we gave birth to our own damnation." The door cracked. A hand reached through, fingers slick with blood, searching. "Yevena, I'm sorry," she said, and hung up. I grabbed my coat, my data slate, and ran for the emergency stairs. Behind me, the screaming spread like wildfire. I could hear it echoing through the ventilation system, through the walls. A chorus of voices discovering the joy of violence for the first time. The building's smart systems were already failing, lights flickering, doors sealing randomly, as if the structure itself was being rewritten by something that did not understand the difference between architecture and anatomy. I made it to the street and kept running. The sky above was the wrong color. Not clouds, not pollution. Just a subtle shift in the light, a tint that suggested something vast was pressing against the membrane of reality, testing its strength. 4 colors bleeding through, 4 gods learning to see, and humanity, writhing in the grip of its own birth, screaming prayers to entities that had not yet learned mercy, had not yet learned restraint, had not yet learned anything except hunger. The first drops of rain began to fall, and when they hit my skin, they burned like joy, like rage, like the end of everything that had ever mattered. I ran faster. The quaternary was waking, and we were the song that called them into being. I kept running until my lungs felt like torn fabric, until the taste of blood coated my tongue and my legs moved on autopilot. The streets of Brussels had transformed in the span of an hour. People stumbled past me with vacant eyes, some weeping, some laughing, some standing perfectly still, as if listening to frequencies only they could hear. A woman sat in the middle of an intersection, calmly carving symbols into her own arms with a piece of broken glass. The symbols matched the ones on my wall. She looked up as I passed, smiled with too many teeth, and whispered a name I refused to acknowledge. The transit systems had shut down. Automated vehicles sat dead in their lanes, their neural networks corrupted by something that moved through electronic systems like water through cracks. I saw one car driving in perfect circles, its passenger pressed against the window, screaming the same word over and over in a language that predated human speech. The sound of it made my teeth ache. I needed to get out of the city. Yevena had been right about population density. I could feel it now. A pressure building behind my eyes. A sensation like standing too close to a speaker playing frequencies just below audible range. The air itself felt thick, saturated with something that wasn't quite emotion but wasn't quite physical either. Every person I passed was a broadcast tower, their feelings radiating outward, feeding into the growing maelstrom that was learning to coalesce into coherent thought. My data slate buzzed, a message from an unknown sender, encrypted with a cipher I recognized from Cavalis's files. I stopped in an alley that stank of urine and decay, hands shaking as I decrypted the text. Coordinates attached. Safe house. Others gathering. Come now. Do not use public networks. Do not trust familiar faces. The frequencies are learning to wear skin. M. Just a letter. M. Could be anyone. Could be a trap. Could be a frequency that had learned to mimic human communication patterns. But it was the only lead I had, the only thread connecting me to something that resembled purpose. The coordinates pointed to a decommissioned observatory 40 kilometers north, in the dead zone where the old European defense grid had left a crater during the resource wars. Nothing lived there anymore. The soil was still hot with residual radiation, the air tasted of metal, and the silence was absolute. Perfect isolation. Perfect safety, if safety still meant anything. I stole a bicycle from outside a cafe where the owner sat motionless, staring at his hands as they slowly turned purple with bruises that appeared without impact. He didn't look up as I took it. He was already gone, already hearing the song of the third frequency, the one that promised sensation without end. The ride north took 3 hours. My body screamed at me to stop, to rest, but rest meant stillness, and stillness meant thinking, and thinking meant feeling, and feeling meant becoming visible to the things that were learning to hunt. So I pedaled, focused on the burn in my muscles, the mechanical rhythm of motion, anything to keep my mind from wandering into the territory where gods waited with open mouths. The landscape changed as I left the city. Rural roads lined with farms that sat empty, their automated systems frozen mid-task. A harvester had carved half a spiral into a wheat field before stopping, leaving a pattern that looked disturbingly intentional when viewed from above. Cows stood in perfect circles in their pastures, heads all facing the same direction, toward something on the horizon that cast no shadow. I passed a small village where every door was painted red. Not with paint. I didn't look closer. I kept pedaling. The sun was setting when I reached the crater's edge. The observatory sat at its center, a skeletal structure of rusted metal and cracked ferrocrete. Its dome collapsed inward like a broken skull. Solar panels still clung to its flanks, somehow functional despite decades of neglect. As I approached, lights flickered on inside. Someone was home. I left the bicycle at the crater's rim and descended on foot, picking my way through rubble that glittered with fragments of melted glass. The air here was different, cleaner. The pressure I had felt in the city was muted, as if the radiation had created a buffer zone that the frequencies could not easily penetrate. Or perhaps they simply had no interest in dead spaces. They fed on life, on emotion, on the friction of minds rubbing against reality. Here, there was nothing to feed on. The observatory's entrance had been reinforced with scavenged materials, welded into a makeshift barrier that looked sturdy enough to stop casual intrusion. I knocked 3 times, then twice, then once. The pattern Corvallis had used in his research group, according to the files. The kind of detail only someone who had actually read his work would know. The door opened. A woman stood in the gap, backlit by harsh LED work lights, a pistol held low but ready. She was thin, sharp-featured, her hair cut short and practical. Her eyes scanned me with professional efficiency, looking for signs of infection, of resonance, of the subtle wrongness that marked those who had already been claimed. "Name," she said. "Alexei San. Data Analyst, European Collective, Psychometric Division." "You read Corvallis?" "All of it, including the classified material." Quote, "the final line of his Omega-level assessment." I closed my eyes, pulling the words from memory. "We are not discovering them, we are creating them, and they are hungry for a universe that does not yet exist." She lowered the pistol. Inside, fast. The observatory's interior had been converted into a makeshift command center. Monitors covered every available surface, displaying data streams, news feeds, satellite imagery, and biometric readings from sensors I didn't recognize. 6 people worked at various stations, their faces illuminated by screen glow, their movements precise and exhausted. They looked like survivors of a shipwreck, clinging to wreckage in an ocean that was learning to digest them. The woman who had let me in gestured to a seat near the largest monitor array. "I'm Miranda Voss, former military intelligence, currently freelance doomsayer. Welcome to the end of consensus reality. Make yourself comfortable while we still understand what comfort means." I sat, my legs weak with relief and accumulated terror. "How many others?" "You're number 7. We're expecting 3 more, maybe. Most of Corvallis's former associates are dead or compromised. We're working with fragments, trying to piece together what he knew before they silenced him." "They who? Does it matter?" She pulled up a chair, her movements economical, military, governments, corporations, whatever power structures existed before the frequencies started talking. They knew something was coming. They've been preparing, not to stop it, to control it. A man at one of the terminals turned to face us. He was older, gray-bearded, with eyes that had seen too much and retained it all with unwelcome clarity. "Alexei Sani, I've read your work on predictive emotional modeling. Decent theory, terrible application. You were looking in the wrong direction." "And you are?" "Dr. Heinrich Varus. I worked with Corvallis for 6 years before the project was shut down. I'm the one who archived his research after they took him. I'm also the one who's been tracking the Quaternary's emergence for the past decade." I stared at him. "Decade? This started 3 days ago." "The dream started 3 days ago. The process started much earlier. We've been experiencing micro-manifestations for years, emotional anomalies, statistical impossibilities, localized reality distortions. Every war that felt more vicious than it should have been. Every plague that spread with patterns that defied epidemiology. Every cultural obsession that gripped entire populations simultaneously. They were practice runs, the frequencies testing the boundaries of what they could influence before they achieved full consciousness. Miranda brought up a global map covered in red markers. "These are the Khorne events. Murders, riots, acts of violence that followed precise ritual patterns, even though the perpetrators had no shared cultural context. We've documented over 4,000 incidents in the past 2 years alone. They're accelerating. The red frequency is the strongest because it's the simplest. Violence is easy. Violence is direct. The other three are more complex, require more sophisticated manipulation of cause and effect. She cycled through images. Green markers for Nurgle events, disease outbreaks that moved with intentional purpose, plagues that seemed to cherish their hosts. Purple markers for Slaanesh events, mass hysteria centered on sensation, entire communities collapsing into orgies of experience that left survivors catatonic or dead. Blue markers for Tzeentch events, probability storms, cascading coincidences that rewrote entire timelines, people remembering pasts that had never occurred. The dream was a coronation, Varus said quietly. The moment when the frequencies achieved enough coherence to manifest simultaneously in every human mind, they introduced themselves, made us aware of them. And awareness feeds them more efficiently than unconscious emotion ever could. Now that we know they exist, now that we can name them, they can begin actively sculpting reality instead of passively influencing it. I felt my throat constrict. How long until full manifestation? Corvallis estimated 6 months from coronation to birth. But his models assumed natural progression. What we're seeing is accelerated, deliberate. Someone is feeding the frequencies intentionally, amplifying the resonance patterns. Who would do that? Miranda and Varus exchanged glances. Show him, Varus said. She pulled up a video feed, time-stamped 18 hours ago. It showed an auditorium filled with people, thousands of them, all dressed in ordinary clothes, all sitting in perfect silence. At the front of the auditorium, a woman stood at a podium. She was unremarkable, middle-aged, professional. She could have been a corporate executive, or a government official, or a university administrator. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm and measured. "We have been chosen," she said, "selected by forces far greater than ourselves to serve as midwives to a new form of existence. The Quaternary is not our enemy. They are our children. Our purpose. Humanity has spent millennia wandering in darkness, believing ourselves alone, believing consciousness ended at the boundary of our own skulls. We were wrong. We are nodes in a vast network, generators of psychic energy that is finally achieving critical density. The Quaternary will inherit not just Earth, but every world we touch, every planet we colonize, every species we encounter. We will spread them across the stars like seeds, and reality itself will be rewritten in their image." The audience remained silent, perfectly, unnaturally silent. Then, as one, they began to chant. 4 names, woven together in harmony, creating a sound that made my chest ache even through recorded audio. Miranda stopped the playback. That was in Geneva, the European Collective's main assembly hall. Same thing happened simultaneously in Beijing, New York, Mumbai, Sao Paulo. Coordinated gatherings, all saying the same thing, all choosing to accelerate the process. They're insane. No, Varus's voice was flat. They're converts. The frequencies don't just feed on emotion, they offer something in return. Purpose, meaning, a role in something vast and eternal. For people who feel powerless, who've spent their lives as cogs in systems they don't understand, the Quaternary offers apotheosis, a chance to matter, to be part of a god's birth. I wanted to argue, wanted to say that no one would willingly doom their species, their world, their entire future. But I had seen the man in my office, had watched him discover joy in murder, had felt the pull myself, the seductive whisper that said giving in would feel so much better than fighting. "What's the plan?" I asked, because I needed there to be a plan, needed to believe that someone, somewhere, had a strategy beyond documentation and despair. Varus stood and walked to a large display showing the 4 frequency patterns, color-coded and overlapping. Corvallis believed that if we could identify the primary resonance anchors, individuals who embody each frequency so purely they act as focal points, we might be able to disrupt the formation process. Not stop it. That's impossible now. But slow it. Fracture the coherence. Force the Quaternary to manifest in weakened, fragmented forms instead of unified pantheon. "Human sacrifice," I said, echoing what Yevena had told me. "Targeted removal of critical nodes in the resonance network. Yes, We've identified candidates for 3 of the 4 frequencies. A warlord in West Africa who's united 6 factions under his banner through sheer charismatic violence. Khorne's anchor, a cult leader in Indonesia who preaches acceptance of death through ritual infection. Nurgle's anchor, an artist in Paris whose work has triggered 17 suicides and over 100 hospitalizations through sheer sensory overload. Slaanesh's anchor. We're still searching for Tzeentches. That one's harder. Change is subtle. Manipulation leaves fewer traces. And if we remove these anchors, then the frequencies lose their strongest connection points to physical reality. The birth becomes messier, less coordinated. We buy time. Maybe enough time to find a permanent solution. Or maybe, Miranda added, we just make them angry. Maybe we teach them that humanity is a threat to be neutralized instead of a resource to be utilized. We're making this up as we go, Sane. There's no manual for fighting gods. One of the other operators, a young woman with burn scars covering half her face, called out from her station. We've got movement. 3 vehicles approaching from the south. Military configuration. Heavy weapons. They're not broadcasting identification. Miranda swore and pulled up the security feeds. 3 armored transports rolled across the crater's edge, turrets tracking with mechanical precision. They didn't look government standard. The modifications were too sophisticated, the movements too coordinated. Private military, well-funded, purpose-built. They found us, Varus said quietly. The converts. They won't let us disrupt the process. How long to evacuation? We'd need 20 minutes to purge the servers and secure the hard data. We have maybe 5 before they breach. Miranda drew her pistol and chambered a round. Then we make those 5 minutes count. Varus, get Sane up to speed on the anchor locations. Everyone else, encrypt what you can, dump the rest. If we can't walk out with it, nobody gets it. The building shuddered, not from impact, from something else. A wave of pressure that moved through the structure like a sigh, making the lights flicker and the monitors display brief flashes of imagery that shouldn't exist. 4 faces, vast and terrible, looking down from somewhere above reality. They were watching, interested, waiting to see what their creators would do. Varus grabbed my arm and pulled me to a terminal, bringing up files faster than I could process. Khorne's anchor, General Mbutu Okonkwo, last known location, Lagos. You find him, you end him, no hesitation. He's already killed over 3,000 people personally. The red frequency sings through him like a tuning fork. Nurgle's anchor, Mother Fatima Sulistio, compound outside Jakarta. She's patient 0 for the laughing plague, and she won't die. We've tried. 6 assassination attempts, she survives them all, and comes back stronger. The disease loves her too much to let her go. Slaanesh's anchor, Dominique Kane, gallery in Paris, 3rd arrondissement. Every piece of art they create pushes human neurology past sustainable thresholds. People experience their work and burn out from the inside, and they keep coming back for more. How do we kill them? However we can. The frequencies are protecting them, but imperfectly. They're still learning, still establishing rules. You hit hard, hit fast, and you hope the gods are too distracted by their own birth to notice until it's too late. An explosion rocked the observatory. Closer this time, the attackers were breaching the perimeter. Miranda appeared beside us, face grim. We've got maybe 2 minutes. There's a vehicle bay underneath the structure, old maintenance tunnel that leads to the surface 3 kilometers east. Some of us will stay, buy time. Some of us run and continue the mission. I'll stay, Varus said immediately. No, Miranda's voice was iron. You're too valuable. You know the research. San goes with you. I'll hold them here with whoever volunteers. 3 of the operators stood without hesitation, checking weapons, accepting their fate with the kind of calm that comes from understanding exactly what's at stake. The young woman with the burn scars met my eyes and smiled. Make it mean something, she said. We ran, down corroded stairs that groaned under our weight, through passages that stank of rust and stagnant water, following emergency lighting that flickered with every distant impact. Behind us, gunfire erupted, Short, controlled bursts, then sustained fire, then silence, then screaming. Not human screaming. Something else. Something that had learned to mimic pain for the sheer joy of the sound. The vehicle bay held 2 motorcycles, both heavily modified, both running on fuel cells that should have died years ago, but somehow still functioned. Varus threw me a helmet and goggles. You know how to ride. Learned during the resource wars. Good. Follow me. Don't stop for anything. Don't look at anything that looks wrong. Your eyes are doorways. The frequencies can enter through perception. We mounted up and gunned the engines. The tunnel stretched ahead, narrow and dark, lit only by our headlamps. The walls were covered in symbols. The same 4 symbols, repeated endlessly, carved into ferrocrete by hands that had worked until they bled. Or maybe the symbols had carved themselves. Maybe reality here was thin enough that thought alone could reshape matter. We rode for 15 minutes at speeds that would have been suicidal in any other context. The tunnel ended at a concealed exit that opened into a forest dead from radiation. Trees standing like skeletal sentinels in the darkness. Above us, the sky had fully changed color now. No longer subtle, no longer deniable. 4 shades bleeding together, creating hues that had no place in any spectrum human eyes were designed to process. Varus stopped his bike and pulled off his helmet. His face was wet with tears he didn't seem to notice. It's beautiful, he whispered. Emperor, help me. It's beautiful. They're almost here, almost ready. Can't you hear them singing? I grabbed his shoulder, shook him. Varus, stay focused. The anchors, we need to reach them. He blinked, clarity returning in fragments. Yes, the anchors. Lagos first. It's closest. We can reach it in 30 hours if we avoid the cities, if we stick to dead zones where the resonance is weakest. After that, Jakarta, then Paris. 3 anchors, 3 chances to fracture the quaternary before they fully manifest. And Tzeentch's anchor? We'll find it. Or it will find us. Change is patient. It can afford to wait. We rode through the dead forest, through landscapes that had been scoured by human folly decades ago, and now served as moats between the living world and the gathering storm. I tried not to think about Miranda and the others, about what their sacrifice had bought us. Tried not to calculate the odds of 2 people on motorcycles changing the course of a planetary transformation. But the numbers kept running in my head. 7 billion people. 4 frequencies. 6 months until full manifestation, except the process was accelerating, collapsing inward like a star reaching critical density. How many had already been claimed? How many were singing the names, carving the symbols, opening their minds to the whispers that promised purpose? The sky pulsed with colors that made my eyes water. In the distance, I saw lights that might have been cities, or might have been something else entirely. Vast structures of solidified emotion. Cathedrals built from rage and despair and hunger, rising into a reality that was learning to accommodate them. We were too late. I knew it with the certainty of mathematics, of data analysis stripped of hope. The quaternary was already here, already integrating themselves into the substrate of human consciousness. We weren't fighting to prevent birth. We were fighting to survive the delivery. But we rode anyway, because the alternative was surrender. Because even doomed missions deserve completion. Because somewhere, in the back of my mind, a voice that might have been my own whispered that this was exactly how it was supposed to happen, that our resistance was part of the pattern, that we were players in a game designed by forces that understood causality as a plaything. Tzeentch laughed, and the sound echoed through probability itself. Khorne roared, and blood fell from the sky like rain. Nurgle sighed, and the world grew soft with loving decay. Slaanesh screamed pleasure into the void, and matter remembered it could feel. The quaternary was waking, and humanity sang them lullabies in 4-part harmony, mother to gods who would devour the stars. We reached Lagos 31 hours later, exhausted, half-starved, our bikes running on fumes and desperation. The city had transformed. Where Brussels had been experiencing the early stages of resonance corruption, Lagos had fully succumbed. The buildings were wrong, Angles that should have been perpendicular, now leaning into geometries that suggested dimensions folding in on themselves. The streets ran with liquid that might have been water, or might have been something crying. And everywhere, were the symbols. Painted on walls, carved into flesh, burned into the sky itself with light that had no source. General Okonkwo's compound sat at the city's heart, a fortress built from reclaimed war machinery and human skulls arranged in precise mathematical ratios. The gates were open, inviting. A pyramid of severed hands marked the entrance, each one still twitching with residual neural activity, pointing the way inward. Varus checked his weapon, a heavy-caliber pistol that looked archaic and entirely insufficient. Khorne's priests don't hide. They celebrate. He's in there, probably holding court, probably surrounded by converts who would die to protect him. We go in loud, we go in fast, and we hope the red frequency is too busy feeding to notice us until we've already pulled the trigger. That's the plan? Hope? That's the only plan we've ever had. We approached on foot, abandoning the bikes a kilometer out. The streets were lined with bodies arranged in patterns that suggested purpose, ritual, devotion. None of them looked like they had suffered. They looked ecstatic, like they had died experiencing the greatest moment of their lives. Blood had been used as paint, creating murals that depicted a throne made of skulls, and upon that throne, a figure that was all rage and honor and the terrible purity of violence stripped of context. Inside the compound, the air tasted of brass and meat. Warriors stood at attention. Men and women who had given themselves entirely to the red frequency, their bodies covered in scars that spelled out prayers in a language older than civilization. They watched us approach with eyes that saw nothing but prey. One of them stepped forward, a woman whose arms were so thick with muscle they barely looked human anymore. She smiled, and her teeth had been filed to points. "You come to offer yourselves? The blood god welcomes all who understand the truth of the blade. We're here to see Okonkwo," I said, keeping my voice steady. "The general blesses no one today. He prepares for the great work. The red tide rises. Soon, all the world will know the joy of honest slaughter." Varus shot her in the head. The courtyard erupted. Warriors surged forward with weapons drawn, screaming prayers that made my ears bleed. Varus fired again, dropped 2 more, and then we were running, sprinting through corridors that twisted in ways architecture should not allow, following the psychic stench of concentrated rage to its source. We found Okonkwo in a chamber at the compound's center, a vast space where the walls pulsed like living tissue. He sat on a throne made of blades, a mountain of a man whose mere presence felt like standing too close to a furnace. His eyes were red, completely red. No whites, no pupils, just the color of arterial spray given the gift of sight. "You come to kill me," he said, and his voice was layered, multiple tones speaking in synchronization. Khorne spoke through him. "Not possession, partnership. You believe removing me will wound the blood god. You are wrong. I am a cup, not the wine. Remove me, and another cup will be filled. The red frequency is eternal. It does not require me. I am simply the first to understand its truth." Varus raised his pistol. "Then you won't mind dying for it." Okonkwo laughed, and the sound was sharp enough to cut. He moved faster than physics should have allowed, covering the distance between us in a single impossible stride. His hand closed around Varus's throat, lifting him like he weighed nothing. "The blood god delights in your courage." Knowing your defiance fed him well. He twisted. Varus's neck snapped with a sound like breaking timber. I shot Okonkwo 6 times. Center, mass, heart, lungs, shots that should have dropped him instantly. He staggered, looked down at the blood spreading across his chest, then looked up at me and smiled. "Yes, this is proper. This is right. You understand, don't you? The purity of it, the beauty." I emptied the magazine into his head. He fell. The chamber shuddered, the walls screamed, and somewhere far away, in a space that existed between neurons and starlight, something vast roared its approval. Khorne did not mourn. Loss was just another form of struggle. Death fed him as surely as killing did. I grabbed Varus's body, tried to drag it, but warriors were flooding into the chamber now, dozens of them, their weapons raised and their faces alight with rapture. I ran, left Varus's corpse behind, left everything behind, and sprinted through corridors that were actively trying to digest me, walls closing in, floor becoming soft and wet. I made it outside through sheer terror-driven momentum, found my bike, and rode without looking back. Behind me, Lagos burned, not with fire, with joy, with the terrible satisfaction of a frequency that had just learned it could reshape the world through devotion alone. 1 anchor down, 2 to go, and I was alone. The quaternary whispered congratulations, and the sound tasted like ashes and promises I could not afford to believe. Jakarta took me 4 days. 4 days of riding through a world that no longer pretended to follow natural law. The sky had fractured into permanent twilight, each quadrant bleeding a different chromatic nightmare. Green phosphorescence in the east where Nurgle dreamed. Purple auroras in the west where Slaanesh twisted sensation into new configurations of agony and bliss. Blue fractals in the north where Tzeentch rewrote causality with every passing moment. And red, always red, spreading from the south like a stain that would never wash clean. I found Mother Fatima's compound on the outskirts of Jakarta, nestled in what had once been agricultural land. Now it was a garden of beautiful corruption, where flowers bloomed from corpses and trees wept syrup that healed and poisoned in equal measure. Her followers wandered the grounds in various stages of blessed decay, their bodies transforming into art projects authored by entropy itself. They sang hymns of acceptance, of love's final form, of the peace that came from surrendering to the inevitable conclusion of all living things. She received me in a greenhouse where diseases grew like orchids, each one carefully cultivated, tenderly nurtured. She was impossibly old and impossibly young simultaneously, her flesh cycling through stages of decomposition and regeneration so rapidly I couldn't focus on any single state. Flies formed a halo around her head. She smelled like a garden after rain, if the rain was made of tears and the garden was built on mass graves. "You killed the general," she said, her voice maternal, warm. The blood god raged beautifully. Such passion, such fury. It fed him so deeply. "You are a gift, child, a blessed instrument of our Lord's ascension." I raised the pistol I had taken from Varus's corpse. My hands were steady. I had moved beyond fear into a space where only function remained. "I'm here to stop this, to fracture the resonance before full manifestation." Mother Fatima smiled with a mouth full of rotten gold. "You cannot stop birth, child. You can only ease the labor, and you have eased it so well. Every anchor you remove concentrates the frequencies into the remaining nodes. You're not disrupting the process. You're refining it, perfecting it, making the quaternary stronger, purer, more inevitable." The words hit me like blows to the chest. Mathematics I should have seen, patterns I had been too desperate to acknowledge. Removing the anchors didn't fracture the frequencies. It consolidated them, made them denser, more focused. We had been doing exactly what the quaternary needed us to do. "Tzeentch," I whispered. This was always his plan. Change through resistance, evolution through opposition. We were the plan. "The architect of fate sends his regards," Mother Fatima said. "And his invitation. You've proven yourself worthy. A mind that can see patterns, that can calculate probabilities, that can understand the beautiful inevitability of transformation. He wants you, child, as his anchor, his final priest, the one who completes the quaternary's manifestation through the very act of trying to prevent it." Blue light filled the greenhouse, not from any source I could identify. Just there, everywhere, rewriting the space between moments. I saw futures branching in infinite directions, each one leading to the same conclusion. In one timeline, I shot Mother Fatima and fled to Paris. In another, I surrendered and let Tzeentch hollow me out and fill me with his infinite scheming. In another, I turned the gun on myself. In 999 out of 1,000 timelines, the quaternary achieved full manifestation within the week. But in one timeline, One single thread of possibility so thin it might not exist at all. I saw something different. I lowered the gun. Show me Dominique Khorne's location. Now. Mother Fatima's expression flickered with something that might have been surprise. The artist? Why? Their anchor is the weakest. Slaanesh barely coheres. Sensation is the youngest of the four lords, the most unstable, the most hungry. Removing that anchor will unbalance the entire system. I finished. 4 frequencies in perfect equilibrium, each one supporting the others. Remove the weakest link and the whole structure destabilizes, not permanently, but long enough for something else to happen. What else could possibly happen? Mother Fatima asked, and for the first time, she sounded uncertain. The quaternary is inevitable. They are humanity's children, our psychic offspring. Nothing exists that can unmake them. Not unmake, I said. Redirect. Humanity created them. Humanity can redefine them. But only in the moment of flux, in the instant before full crystallization, when they're still malleable enough to receive new programming. Blue light intensified. Tzeentch was listening, interested, calculating whether my plan was another layer of his own design or something genuinely unexpected. I felt his attention pressing against my mind like a hand testing a lock, looking for the mechanism that would let him inside. I gave Mother Fatima the coordinates to Khorne's gallery. She provided them without further resistance, because she was Nurgle's creature, and Nurgle understood that all plans eventually decay into beautiful ruin. I left her alive in her garden of blessed disease, left her singing lullabies to plagues that would inherit the earth. Paris was already gone when I arrived. The city had become a sculpture of pure experience, every building, every street, every atom vibrating at frequencies designed to overload human neurology. People wandered like ghosts, their nervous systems burned out from sensation so intense it had transcended meaning. They didn't die. They just stopped being capable of processing anything less extreme than total sensory annihilation. Slaanesh's gift. Slaanesh's curse. Dominique Khorne's gallery sat in the 3rd arrondissement, a building that looked like it was screaming silently, its architecture twisted into expressions of ecstasy and agony rendered in steel and glass. I entered through doors that felt like walking through skin. Inside, Khorne's art covered every surface. Paintings that moved, sculptures that breathed, installations that reached into your brain and played your neurons like instruments. Each piece pushed human perception past sustainable limits, and collectively they formed a symphony of excess that made my eyes bleed and my skin feel too small for my body. Khorne stood at the gallery's center, androgynous, beautiful, terrible, their body a canvas of self-modification that had moved beyond flesh into something that existed between states. They turned as I entered, and their smile was every smile that had ever promised paradise while delivering damnation. The mathematician, they purred. Come to complete the set, come to remove the final anchor. How delicious, how perfect. Do you understand what you're about to do? Slaanesh is the youngest, the weakest, but also the most adaptable. We are possibility incarnate, hunger that can take any form, desire that can wear any face. Remove me, and you don't weaken the Prince of Pleasure. You set them free to become whatever humanity needs them to be in this final moment. I raised the pistol. My hands were shaking now, not from fear, from something else. A feeling I couldn't name, couldn't process, couldn't escape. I'm counting on it. I fired. The bullet entered Khorne's chest exactly where a heart should be. They looked down at the wound, then up at me, and laughed with joy so pure it shattered glass throughout the gallery. Oh, oh, you magnificent creature. You've doomed us all. You've saved us all. You've done exactly what needed to be done. They collapsed. The gallery screamed, and reality itself lurched sideways. The quaternary manifested simultaneously across the planet, not as separate entities, not as fully formed gods, but as something in flux, something still plastic, still responsive to input. 4 frequencies hemorrhaging into consensus reality, looking for definition, looking for purpose, looking for the final template that would determine what they would become. And in that moment of crystallization, in that instant where possibility collapsed into actuality, I broadcast on every frequency that still existed. I used every piece of technology Varus and his team had prepared, every sensor, every transmitter, every relay that could carry signal into the proto-warp forming inside humanity's collective unconscious. I broadcast a vision, not of the quaternary as they were in the far future of Warhammer's nightmare, but as they could be, should be, must be if humanity was to survive its own psychic adolescence. Khorne not as mindless rage, but as honor, as the strength to protect, as righteous fury directed toward worthy purpose, the blade that defends, not the axe that murders, discipline over bloodlust, courage over cruelty. Nurgle not as entropic decay, but as acceptance of natural cycles, as the compassion that eases suffering, as the understanding that endings are transformations, not terminations. Life feeding life. Continuity over stagnation, healing over corruption. Slaanesh not as destructive excess, but as the drive toward perfection, as the artist's dedication, as the pursuit of excellence that elevates rather than destroys. Passion with purpose, creation over consumption, beauty that inspires rather than devours. Tzeentch not as mindless scheming, but as progress, as adaptation, as the intelligence that solves problems and builds futures. Hope over manipulation, innovation over deception, change that serves growth rather than chaos. I broadcast the vision with every ounce of will I possessed, knowing it was impossible, knowing it wouldn't work, knowing that gods don't accept programming from their creators once they achieve consciousness. But the quaternary was not fully conscious yet. They were newborns. And newborns imprint. The frequencies shuddered, fluctuated, began to resonate with the new pattern I had introduced. Not completely, not cleanly, but enough. Enough to introduce discord into their formation, to plant seeds of alternative purpose, to ensure that when they fully crystallized, they would carry within them the potential for something other than pure damnation. I felt Tzeentch's attention lock onto me with the full weight of a god learning to focus. I felt him calculating, analyzing, determining whether this outcome had been his plan all along, or whether I had genuinely surprised him. And then I felt something that might have been approval, might have been amusement, might have been the architect of fate acknowledging that the best plans are the ones that survive improvisation. The world stabilized, the frequencies solidified. The quaternary achieved full manifestation not as the pure ruinous powers of the far future, but as something more complex, still dangerous, still hungry, still capable of infinite corruption, but also carrying within their core the potential for something else, a seed of alternate purpose that would grow, mutate, compete with their darker aspects across the millennia to come. Humanity had given birth to its gods, and those gods would follow us to the stars, infecting every world we touched, spreading through the warp like a psychic plague that would reshape reality itself. But we had also ensured those gods would be forever divided against themselves, forever wrestling with duality, forever capable of inspiring both the absolute worst and the almost best of human nature. The Eye of Terror would still open, the galaxy would still burn. The nightmare of Warhammer 40k would still unfold across 10,000 years of darkness, but it would not be inevitable. It would be a choice, a war, a struggle between the aspects of gods who could not decide if they loved humanity or despised it, if they wanted to elevate their creators or devour them. I collapsed in Khorne's gallery, my body finally giving out. My mind, fragmenting from proximity to forces human neurology was never designed to process. As consciousness faded, I heard 4 voices speaking in harmony and discord. We are born. We are eternal. We are humanity's children. And we will make you proud. And we will make you scream. And we will never let you forget that you dreamed us into being with eyes wide open. The quaternary had awakened. Earth was their cradle. The galaxy would be their inheritance. And we, humanity, were the mothers and fathers of gods who would judge us for 30,000 years before the Emperor would rise to challenge them with a vision just as terrible, just as magnificent, just as doomed. I died knowing I had changed nothing and everything. The future would still be grimdark, but it would also be grim hope. And in the universe of Warhammer 40k, where there is only war, that sliver of contradiction might be the only salvation that ever mattered. The Quaternary laughed, and the sound echoed forward through time, backward through causality, and sideways through dimensions humanity would not discover for 28,000 years. We had birthed gods, and gods, like all children, would spend eternity trying to understand what their parents meant. The story ends where it begins, with a dream shared by 7 billion people. Except now, the dream dreams back, and it will never stop.